I'm Tracy Osborne, and you're listening to the Daring Woman podcast. Imagine the story of a generation being altered by women who were empowered to live their truth and in turn can empower others to live theirs. It's time to rewrite the narrative. All right, so, I'm a mom of 4 kids, 4 girls, and how I'm staying beyond me. I really am not sure how I've managed it. The oldest is now 27. The youngest is almost 15. And so I've been a mom of teenagers forever. I've been a mom forever. It seemed like basically my whole life, really. Or not, more than half my life is what I should say. And it's thankless. It's exhausting, but it is so worth it. I absolutely love my girls. They are my best friends. And, going through the death of my husband and everything, they have just been amazing support systems for me. That, to just someone that I can reach out to. They're there for me all the time, and it's awesome. But my guest today, Jenn Taylor, has 18 kids. Yeah, you heard that right, 18. And I'm thinking, I'm insane with 4. How is she keeping it all together? So Jenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks.
Go ahead.
To answer that, it doesn't matter if you have 1 or 18. You just summed it up. It's really difficult raising kids. You have to get a license to fish, and anyone can parent. And it's the most difficult job, if you want to title it a job, that you'll ever do. So the number 1, it's definitely not a competition. Thank God, unless I can win something. And then in that case, bring it. It's not a competition, and we're all struggling as parents. So the number doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm not, people ask if they can come to the house because they just want to see what it's like to have a lot of kids at home. And when people come to the house, one thing that they say every time is that it's not as loud and crazy as they anticipated. So if you take 1 kid's energy and multiply it by 12, we had 12 living at home just a couple of years ago. You think it's 12 times as insane, and it doesn't work that way. So that's the first thing. It's not as crazy as people think, and it's difficult no matter what the number is.
Wow. My first thought would be chaos, complete utter chaos. But what are the age ranges of the kids?
That kind of depends on the breakdown. So first of all, within that 18, there are 5 that I call the extras. They were kids. I did foster care for 12 years, and I was involved in foster care for about 20 in one capacity or another, public speaking or volunteering or working in a nonprofit. I was a program supervisor. So I have about 20 years combined experience in foster care. And those 5 extras, one was a foreign exchange student from Germany who's 33. She's the oldest of all of the kids. She came to us when she was 16 for a year, and she's just always been part of our family. And to not consider her one of the kids would be a major slight for both sides. Right. So that's 1. And then of the other 4 extras, 3 are long-term foster care and 1 was a stepdaughter. So those are the 5 extras. And in the extras, I have a 33-year-old, a 31-year-old, and then the rest of them fall within the range of my oldest biological, who's 27, just like yours. So that's where the age tops out. So when I'm talking about the bulk of the kids, it's those 13 that are, I call permanent residents. They're adopted, or I have papers on them. So they're biological or adopted. That's not PC, I know, but they're permanent residents. Gotcha. So there's a 13 core and then the 5 extras. And so the oldest, like I said, is 33. Of those 13 core kids, the permanent residents, the oldest is 27 and the youngest is 9. Having said that, 12 of the 13 were born in 10 years. So we had 12 kids in 10 years and then an 8-year gap and a 9-year-old. So I have an only child in an enormous family, what seems like an only child in an enormous family on the back end. And we had 12 kids in 13 years. And then those 5 were kind of sprinkled within there.
Goodness.
It was actually easier to have 12 kids in 10 years than it is to have an only child at the back end. So.
Oh, I can imagine because with 12 kids, there's always somebody somebody else to play with or whatever. But with a spread like that, it's got to be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that is. So
that falls on you to entertain him.
Yeah. And she knows the benefit of having a huge family because she grew up in that. But we knew that we call it the mass exodus. We had 3 girls graduate a year ago. So we had in that condensed amount of kids, they go from 17 to 27 essentially. And we knew we had duplicate. We don't have twins and we are a blended family to some degree, which I can talk about. But, we knew that they would all be leaving at the same time. They were really close in age. They're very close to each other, which is a blessing. We're very close to almost all of them. They go through their stuff as they become adults. But we knew we would have this. We had 3 in diapers and I was breastfeeding 2 and I was always pregnant. And, on the front end, and on the back end, we knew that they would all be moving out and graduating really close together. And so we've experienced 3 kids in diapers and breastfeeding 2 at a time and being pregnant. And we've experienced the mass exodus on the other end because the oldest is 27 of that crew. And the foster kids were done after she was born. So although they're older in age, they go up to 33. They're 33, 31, 27, 26, and 15, 13. They're all older. They happened after I had given birth to my first biological child. And so they were all together. It was all together. And I'm only 18 years older than the oldest foster child and 16 years older than our foreign exchange student. But when they came to us, I was, considerably older. So they were still just my kids. Yeah.
Sure. Wow. Kudos to you. I mean, when I remember when I was younger, before my parents divorced, we had foster kids too, and they were all teenagers. So it's people like you that open your homes and your hearts to this, for lack of a better term, the strays, those who really, really need someone to love them, to just love them. That's all they really need is just, somebody to love them, because obviously they're in the foster system. So they're not getting that from where they should be. So that's fantastic that you've done that. Now you say you don't have any twins?
No.
Oh my goodness.
And I had 14 kids. Of those 18, I had 14, and I had at the time 9 living at home, and I had been divorced. And my daughter, who's 27 now, and a mutual friend of ours introduced me to this guy, and Dane. They introduced me to Dane several years ago. And he had 4 kids, and he had been married and divorced and then remarried, and she died. And so he had 4 kids and his wife had died. And that's where we got the 18. So his biological kids are part of mine. Sure. They're not step kids. They're not my biological kids. They aren't foster kids. They fall somewhere in this different.
They're just your kids.
They're just my kids, yes. And people who have ever done foster care understand it. They're all my kids, all 18. But That's how we got the 18. So the question that people ask me, one of the questions that they ask me the most is, which one are yours? They're all mine. I know they're trying to differentiate, like, which 4 did you give birth to? And which 5 are adopted? And which 5 are the extras? And which 4 are Danes?
Right.
But that's offensive to the kids.
Yeah.
Because they they're not segregated. We don't have this like, you're the redheaded stepchildren and you're the foster kids. They are all equal. I don't feel differently about any of them, from the foreign exchange student to the ones that I gave birth to Dane's kids and it's really hard to put them in categories. I think as humans, we want to put things in boxes. We want things to make sense. And my family doesn't make sense to people. And, the adopted kids, there are 5 that I adopted, and 3 of them were newborns. I was at the hospital for 2. 1 I picked up from the hospital. 2 I was at the hospital. 1 was 2, 1 was 5. And then those extra kids, 1 was 3 months old, and so they don't feel different to me. And I think, but that's a question that I get asked a lot. And I just tell them, they're all mine. And I know you're trying to differentiate, but they're all mine.
Right.
Period. And if the kids are present, I just ask them, hey, which ones of you guys are mine? And they all raise their hand. And so, we do not fit into a box. This family does not fit into a box. And there was no plan for this. There was no plan to have 18 kids. I said no in foster care a lot more than I said yes. I was told I couldn't have children, and I went through infertility. I was pregnant 7 times, gave birth 4. You just kind of don't know what life is going to throw at you, and I allowed it to happen. And I had to feel good, feel like these were my kids. And so it doesn't make sense to people when I say, well, I turned down more than I could, than I took. I said no more than yes. And I didn't think I could have kids, but I gave birth to 4. And Dane's wife died, and I have his 4. That doesn't necessarily make sense. I think I was blessed to just be pretty laid back in a lot of ways, and let it come to me as it happened, and not have any set expectations or goals. It just had to feel right. And in that, I've just kind of felt totally blessed.
Wow. That's incredible. That is just incredible. And I love that, you follow the no labels, with a lot of blended families, they'll say there's no steps in this family. My kids are, other than my younger 2, they're all half sisters. They all have different dads. But they're still sisters. They don't use the word half in there at all. They're just sisters. That's just how it is. And that's exactly how a family should be. No labels, no segregation, like you said, the redheaded stepchild, children over here, and then the adopted ones, this is your area of the house.
Right. You sit in the back of the bus.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. No, there's no labels. And I grew up like these kids. I should have been in foster care. And my book is a self-help memoir, and it's about my life growing up. And there were people that were really pivotal in my life, most especially my 3rd grade teacher. And I knew from her that I was worth it, and I was loved, and I was smart, and I was talented. And things got worse in my house growing up after 3rd grade. But she had planted such a seed in me that growing up, I knew I wanted to make a difference to other kids, because someone had taken the time to make a difference to me. So when I was told I couldn't have kids, I thought, yeah, well, I'm going to do it anyway. That's fine. They can come from anywhere. And so for me, from my personal perspective, the children that I biologically gave birth to are the extras. Most people feel like, oh, you took on foster kids, so you took on extras. No, those are I completely planned that. I didn't expect the blessing of being able to give birth to 4 kids.
Sure.
And it nearly killed me. And there were 10 surgeries involved. And I lost 3, including twins at 19 weeks. And that's a whole different story, part of my story. But those were extras. And I have been so open with the kids about the adoption and the foster care. And they grew up in this environment. When you do foster care for 12 years, they remember it. They were upset when we stopped about 8 years ago. And And now they want to take in every dog that they see. I mean, we just have this like, oh, you don't have grandparents? Let's just find some and adopt them. That's fine. You totally can have grandparents, you know? So in my family, with the kids, they joke around a lot, you know, like Kezia will say, well, I'm allergic to pineapple. And Bree will say, how are you allergic to pineapple? Were you adopted or something? She's like, yeah, I was adopted. She's like, oh my gosh, Kezia, we didn't know, you know? And
Right.
the biological kids will be like, yeah, no, I'm your sister. I was adopted too. I'm like, no, I gave birth to you. And they're like, no, Mom, you didn't. We were both, you know, I mean, they have such a love for each other and for their situations and where they came from. And that was because that's how it was presented to them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, adopted kids will be like, Mom gave birth to you. It was a crapshoot. She chose me. She picked me special, you know? And I think you need to have that kind of laid back, fun attitude where there is no stigma or separation or segregation. They were all unexpected and they were all chosen. And I was excited every single time, no matter where they came from. And they were hard no matter where they came from. I mean, Kezia was a drug baby and Taylor has a 50% chance of Huntington's disease. And Nicholas is autistic. And Olivia had 2 out of 3 signs of Down syndrome. And I'm not telling you which one of those were biological and which ones were adopted and which weren't, you know, I mean, that's just, no, it doesn't matter. And so I think, when someone made a difference to me, I wanted to make a difference to someone else. And I didn't know what that would look like. And I just took it as it came. And I've loved it. And I certainly didn't see Dane coming, nor was I necessarily really excited. I did not want to be fixed up. I did not want to go on this date. He says when we went on our first date, I had my arms crossed. You know, I was like, I'm doing this to humor everyone else. But we've been together from that moment on. We've never not been together. So when situations arise, whether it was that relationship or the foster kids or the adoptions or the biological or, you know, having some of the ashes of his dead wife in my closet, you just kind of shrug and go, yeah, that feels right. And we're going to go with it. And we'll figure it out as we go. Because there's no license. There's no manual. Thank goodness. There shouldn't be. And you just kind of roll with it. And it's been the most fun adventure. We all have weird things about our personalities. And part of my personality is that I get lost. I back out of my driveway the wrong direction. You know, I have zero sense of direction. I don't know how I traveled the US several times before phones and GPS were available. But I did. I managed somehow. And so, you know, my kids are used to me being like, oh, well, like I've been lost here before. It's no big deal. And everything's an adventure. And I think just in my personality, knowing that I get lost everywhere, I know I can figure it out. I know it doesn't have to be scary. And we're just going to go with it. And that's kind of how I've been about everything. Like, well, we'll just see where this direction takes us. I don't know. And it's been really fun. And, you know, I screw it up every day. And I'm sorry. There is no license for having a kid and no grade that you get and no job description that will ever work for parenting your kids. And so have I done a great job? I mean, I want to do a great job. I've showed up and given 100% every day. Sometimes 100% looks like a fraction. And sometimes it looks like you're knocking it out of the park. And you screw up all the time because even when you're trying, parenting is really hard. I react sometimes, or I raise my voice more than I'd like. And we're human, but I certainly have wanted to do better than my parents, which I've done. And I wanted to make a difference, which I've done. And I wanted to do a really good job, which I've done. And I'm sorry for the times it didn't go as well as I would have liked. And I hope you take it and do an even better job.
Right. And that's kind of the whole goal is to raise kids and say, okay, I did the best that I could with you. Now you take what you've learned from me, and when it's your turn, you can continue to improve. You know, I know that that's kind of how it is with mine. My oldest has 2 babies, and So she looked at what we went through, because I was 19 when I had her. So, and I was a total mess, and she went through, basically her and I grew up together. And, so she was able to take that and say, okay, well, this is what mom did that was awesome. This is what mom did in her life that probably could have been done better, and she uses that wisdom and those experiences in her own parenting now. And I think that's fantastic.
I do too. And there's no right answer or right way. And we take the experience that we have. And, I had Bree at 21 and I went through infertility and I was married. And that all sounds so stupid now. Like, really? You were 20 and you were going through infertility and already married? Yeah. And, you do what's in front of you. Mm-hmm. And I did. And I have no regrets about that. That was what I wanted. And I'm thankful and feel blessed. And I think, I hope what I've taught my kids is that you continue to fail in an upward direction. Mm-hmm. And you try to do your best. You take what you can from me and move forward, make it better. I want that for them. It's fun and it's crazy and it's an adventure. I remember Dana and I talking, I think 3 or 4 years ago, up to 5 years ago, when we still had a lot of kids living at home. We had 12 kids at home at that point. And 12 is about the most that I think I've had 12 kids at home several times, but that's the most. I haven't had all 18, just with ages and with foster kids coming and going and stuff like that. 12 is pretty much the cap that we've had in the house. But I looked at him and like you said, we had a whole bunch of teenagers that I've been through suicide attempts and cutting and drug use and running away and calling the police on my kids and pressing charges and you name it. We've been through it. One of my girls was pregnant at 17. We've been through all of it. Sure. And that's no reflection on parenting. That's life and your kids growing up and starting to make their own choices and failing forward, which is not a bad thing, but it is a tough thing. And I looked at him and I said, God, what are we doing? Here you had 4 kids, which is a big family, and I had 14, and that's a big family. And we have 12 kids at home, and we're going through all this stuff with different teenagers. Like, what are we doing? It's so hard. It's just so hard. And fortunately, I don't think we never hit the wall at the same time, which is great. And I remember him looking at me and going, you know how fast this is going to go by? This is going to go by so fast.
It does.
Oh my God. And which of course I already was aware. At that point, I think Bree was 21 and she was out of the house and we had 12 at home and it's already going by in a blink. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's going to keep going by so fast. And in a couple of years, we're going to be down to just our youngest one at home. It's just going to be the 3 of us. And we're going to wonder, how did it go by so fast? And now we have our youngest is at home and she's 9 and we have a 17-year-old at home and she's going into her senior year of high school. And we looked at each other recently and I said, oh my God, remember that conversation we had a few years ago when it was just so hard, when we're behind our closed doors and one of us has hit the wall and is crying and is like, how are we going to get through this with this kid and come out on the other side and they're going to be okay and we're going to be okay and we will feel like we have done a good job. And we did. We've gotten through every one of those things where I've come out on the other side and I look back and would I have made changes? Yes. But for the most part, we did a really, really great job and we handled situations very well. And we got through our own relationship struggles that almost tore us apart. And we got through the struggles with the kids that could have torn us apart. And we did a really good job. And now we're down to the last 2. And in a year, we'll be down to 1. So that conversation we had several years ago where it's going to go by so fast, it did. And we did get through it. And we did do really well. And the kids are all okay. And the great thing about seeing them becoming adults now, because almost all of them are, mm-hmm. is that, we have 3 boys that are living in a house together. and all of our kids, almost all of the kids talk to each other. There are a couple, like even when they were growing up and living at home, they would pair up and play together, but then it wouldn't be the same kids pairing up and playing together every single day. Sometimes a couple of them would be arguing and not like each other for a while. And that has continued into adulthood. Some of them, I talk to some of them I talk to every single day on a very regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And actually a lot of them we talk to on a daily basis. I say most of them, the majority. And others we talk to not as often, but then they'll come back around, and
Sure.
we just kind of allow that to happen. But it's really great to see, they call each other their best friends. There are some of them that they are siblings, but they are best friends too. And so it's not just that we have done a good job raising the kids and going through all of these issues, and that we're close with our kids and have really good relationships with almost all of them. It's that they have really close relationships with each other, with almost all of each other. And although that rotates through in every direction,
Mm-hmm.
It's so fantastic to see, like, okay, maybe I didn't screw them all up. Maybe it's all okay, because there are times in parenting where you're like, oh my gosh, is this worth it? What am I doing? What gave me the right to be a parent and think that I had any skills at all to tackle this? And I'm screwing it up every day. And I just want them to come out of this okay, knowing that I love them and I'm trying really hard. And when you're on the other side of that, it's great to see that that's happening.
Right.
And you realize when you're not in the moment, it's 150% worth it, even though it was so hard. But you have to kind of struggle through having toddlers, remember those days, and struggle through potty training and struggle through school and bullying and all of those issues they go through. And then they become adults and you're like, oh, it was so worth it. I would have done more, as crazy as that sounds.
And then you get to be there for them as they go through those struggles with their own kids.
And every one of my kids every one of the kids that's left the house has come back.
Sure.
Because we have so many kids, our kids want to get out. They want to move out. They want to be on their own. And I think part of that is that we've raised a very independent, strong-minded, strong-willed. They were hard to raise, but I love them as adults, personalities. And I'm very thankful for that. And the other thing is that they were in a huge family and just wanted to get out.
Oh, yeah.
And for both reasons, I'm very thankful that they did. They got out of Dodge, and they've all moved out thinking we don't really know entirely what we're talking about because we're not young anymore, and we probably never were. And so my parents are idiots.
Uh-huh.
and that they've got a whole better handle on it than we ever could have. So they're going to go strike it out on their own, and life is filet mignon and shrimp scampi, and they can put anything in the shopping cart, that sort of thing. Not entirely, but they can do it better. And every one of them has come back. Everyone has somewhat struggled enough to say, can I move back in with you? And every time we've said yes. Dane and I didn't have that. We didn't have a safety net. We didn't have parents that were there. He emancipated at 15 and I graduated and moved out at 17, and we didn't have much of a safety net after that. And so we wanted to be that for our kids, and every one of them has come back. And when they come back, to take that deep breath and like, okay, you were right. And I'm sorry. And I didn't realize, and I just need to regroup. But then when they go out that next time, they nail it. They nail it.
Yeah.
And that's a complete shift. It's a pivot in our relationship where now we can start working on, we're not parents and we're not friends, but we're some sort of hybrid. And now you get it. And now you have enough perspective to understand things. And it changes and it becomes a really super fun relationship. And then we're there like for advice, kind of as a parent and kind of as a friend, but not either. Yeah. And that's probably my favorite time, although that means I'm 48. Which is I don't know how that part happened.
I'm 47, so I totally get it.
Like when did I think So in our generation, we looked at our parents, and our parents' generation was, Dane and I recently looked this up. I said our parents were the least healthy generation if you look at all of them in history. And we looked up, and it is true. So our parents' generation, they were really trying to do a better job and a good job and a different job, and they really didn't nail it.
Because their parents, a lot of them, grew up in the Depression.
Right.
And so, yeah, because that's kind of what I went through. My grandma grew up in the Depression, so she kept everything. Little tiny pieces of string, extra little pieces of everything, and so did my mom. And I'm here going, right. Minimalism. Thank you.
Yes. No, we're minimalists too, but that took a long and so we try to do it better. And it was also the 70s. There was a lot of shift in the 70s, and it was a lot of really unhealthy examples of relationships. The drugs and alcohol were much different in that generation. It was a very unhealthy generation.
Everybody smoked everywhere.
Yeah. It was, and no fault. I mean, I don't excuse it, and I don't fault it either. It was just kind of where they were at.
Exactly.
And our generation is really trying to do better, and we're screwing up our own things in that whole shift. And so it's just a very interesting journey, the whole part of it. But I remember looking at my parents and thinking, now it's the most unhealthy generation. I don't ever want to be in my 40s because, oh my gosh, that looks horrible. You're old and it's going to be terrible. And for our generation, we're much healthier, much, much healthier. We're one of the healthier generations.
Right.
And so I didn't know what my 40s would look like, except from the example. And it's nothing like that for us. I feel better than I did in my 20s. I'm not pregnant anymore. I'm not breastfeeding anymore.
Right.
I'm not chasing toddlers anymore. I had a hysterectomy. We're just a completely different generation than the one that was our example. And so what we thought it would look like is nothing what it looks like for us. And I love my 30s. I love my 40s. It's been fantastic. And hopefully that's a good guide for our kids that you don't have to slow down and it can get better. And yes, please take everything I'm doing and fail it forward some more.
Right. Oh, wow. This has been awesome. I can't believe how much energy you have.
Well, that's another thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and just, kind of sharing a little bit about a glimpse into your life and what it's like to have so many wonderful kids and how to blend them all together and make a great family. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
You are welcome.
All right. And ladies, trust me, we get it. Parenting is tough. And there's days you just want to throw in the towel and say, I'm done, go away, and then there's days where you're like, don't ever grow up. and there's, you got to find that balance there. But, for those days where it's just, you're struggling, make sure you come over to our Facebook group, come join us over in the Daring Women group. There's so many of us in there who are moms, and we get it. We've been there. So, it's facebook.com/groups/Daring Woman. Come in there. It's a safe place. You can vent and cry and moan and whine and gripe all you want about whatever you need to, and we will all be there with love and support and chocolate. So,
all right. I didn't know that. All right. I'm there.
Chocolate and wine for those of you who drink wine. I'm not a wine drinker, so I've got the chocolate. But definitely come join us there. And again, Jen, thank you so much for joining us today. And ladies, we will talk to you next week on the show.